Welcome to the most important week of the year for the podcast industry. Welcome to Podcast Movement 2025.
This is a brand new type of research study because it focuses on one simple thing, as Matt was teasing a second ago. Growth. That's it. I'm Hal Rood. I'm one of the owners and operators of Strategic Solutions Research. We operate in 22 countries around the world. We do large strategic studies, but we also study individual podcasts moment by moment by moment. And our goal is to figure out how do we engage that audience better with better content execution. And it's been such a pleasure to work on this project with a guy I consider a friend. He's the CEO of Point-to-Point Research, Tim Bronsel.
Hey, great to be with everybody here. Point-to-Point Marketing is an audience development marketing company. We're in our 28th year. We work with broadcast, podcasts, streaming, and event ticketing services. And excited to share this study. And Hal, let's just get into it.
Yeah, let's do it. When we set out to work on this study at the beginning of the year, what we didn't want to do is tread on the ground of other existing podcast research. There are good people and good studies out there doing things for the benefit of the podcast industry. We wanted to be different. We wanted to be additive to what's out there so that we could give something additional to move the industry forward. And so our hope is by the end of this presentation, we'll give you that. We'll give you some tangible actions you can take back so that on your first day back into the office after you get back from Dallas, you have a plan of some things you can do on the product side and the marketing side to move your podcast or podcast forward. And so the spirit we want to leave you with is fired up, like ready to unleash, be even better, and take your podcast to the next level. There's a lot of exciting things we're going to talk about. So at the outset, we said, all right, what do we want to accomplish with this study? Let's keep it simple. And it really comes down to two simple things. And when I say simple, I mean simple but not easy. First, how do we grow usage with existing audience? That's going to be the first easiest way to grow performance of your podcast. People who are drifting in occasionally. Look at a monthly user of your podcast. How do we get that monthly user to come back weekly? How do we get the weekly user to come back daily? And then obviously the ultimate goal, right, that we all have is for that person to say that we're their favorite podcast. That's always the obvious goal. And we're going to talk about why it's vital that you are people's favorite podcast and not just their second, third, or fourth choice. Second, how do you grow your reach and expand the audience? And Tim is going to cover that in a lot of detail, and he's an expert in that. And in fact, spoiler alert, he is going to actually reveal the key findings of the podcast study, so you get a sense of where we're going today.
So over the next 15 minutes, we're going to cover a variety of topics. Here they are. Podcast shelf space is limited. When you're looking at someone's weekly consumption, you really want to be in that top 3, and Hal's got data on that. That it's likely you won't get a second chance. So that first few minutes of your podcast are key. So with that, fast starts are critical. We'll talk about ways that people are exiting the podcast. And then also podcast leak audience. There are some execution things that we can probably shore up that people will not leave your podcast halfway through. Here's the plus side is there's huge upside on engagement. There's a lot of opportunity to do some very basic things that we're able to do, but also there are multiple ways to fuel discovery. So that's what we're going to cover here in the next 15 minutes, and how you cover the first part.
Right, yeah, let's just review the methodology of the study. This was fielded just last month, so if you thought as you walked in you could smell freshly baked muffins just coming out of the oven, it's this study. I mean, this is fresh data coming right out. The adults 18 to 54 is the universe that we're talking to today. Sample size 1,200, and sample is weighted to the most recent U.S. Census. everyone had to listen to a podcast in the previous month, but the reality is in this sample, 9 out of 10 listen weekly or daily. These are people that regularly use podcasts, very important consumers that we want to talk to. We want to know what they really dig about what we do and what are the things that we need to improve upon in order to get better. So let's look at the current environment of podcast usage today. All right, you look at a typical podcast consumer. How many podcast titles do they regularly consume? What's the shelf space for them? You know what that number is? It's 3, folks. 3 out of the millions of podcasts that are out there available for them, let alone all the other audio. Their shelf space for podcasts is 3 titles. Tough, it's sobering, right? And the other thing we want to point out is it's hard to become their number 1. All right, the majority of podcast consumers listen to or watch 3 or fewer titles a week, as I said a minute ago. All right, you have to be in the top 3 if you want to be in the game. All right, 3 out of 4 people love their favorite podcast. They don't just like it, they love their favorite podcast. So, all right, it's going to be tough to become their favorite podcast, right? It's going to be difficult to just immediately assume you're going to become someone's favorite. So the reality is simple math. If you're not their favorite, and we can't assume we're just immediately going to become someone's favorite, you're really fighting for 1 or 2 slots. Let's talk about how important it is to be someone's favorite podcast. Uber important. All right, the majority of podcast consumers, all right, if you think about the typical consumer, all of the usage they give to podcasts, the majority of those consumers are spending 75% of their usage on their one favorite podcast. 75%, let that sink in. That means if you're their second or third choice, you're fighting over the last 25% of usage. You're fighting over the scraps. So we've got to be fighting to be someone's favorite. All right, that's all sobering, and we're not trying to bum you out, but we're trying to fire you up, right? Now we have to go back, and we have to be the best we can be. Every podcast matters. Every segment matters. How we start matters. We have to be intentional with everything we do in the podcast because we have to fight like hell to be someone's favorite podcast. All right, growing within your existing audience. We want to talk about what we call correcting execution issues, product-based improvements we can do to help grow and help. What we want to do is we want to take the consumer down a funnel. We want them to try us for the first time, then we want them to use us occasionally, and eventually we want them to fall in love with us so that we're their favorite, so then the marketing side can bring them down another funnel and do a lot of fun with them and really engage them and have a relationship that's lasting. So how do we grow and first start by correcting execution issues? The first impression is so important. All right, you've worked so hard to get that person to try your podcast for the first time. The magic moment happens. They're going to press play on one of your episodes for the first time. That first impression counts. You might not get a second chance to connect with that person, and here's why. 4 out of 10 people say when they try a podcast and are disappointed, they're not likely to try it a second time. Right? Tough. Now you might say, well, how? The majority might give me a second chance, and yes, that's true. I don't want to take that chance. The 41% is too big a number where they're saying they're not going to give us a second chance. Make that first impression count, and the way you do that is with a fierce attention to the details on your product execution. All right, so we also asked listeners why, podcast consumers, why they stop early. They're listening to a podcast, and this isn't just a podcast they're listening to for the first time, just podcasts in general. They're listening, they press stop. Why'd you do that? What are the big reasons? And these are percentages of the big reasons why. They could select more than one, so you're going to see, the numbers adding up to more than 100. Number one answer, it was just boring. Okay, that's kind of general, but there's more specific things that we can talk about here. All right, it started with too much meaningless talk. 1 out of 3 people said that. All right, and what does that mean? Well, we didn't follow we're not following in line with the expectations of that we set for that podcast. So whatever expectation you set that you're going to talk about in that podcast, deliver on that promise. Because if you don't, a third of the people might press that stop button. 1 out of 5 says the discussion moves too slowly. Forward momentum really matters a lot, all right? And we're going to talk about not repeating yourselves. We're going to talk about keeping it moving forward. Other things on the list, 1 out of 4 say the hosts keep repeating themselves, all right? And that can take the form of a lot of things. One host literally kind of saying the same thing over and over again, kind of getting stuck in a rut. It could be 2 hosts having a debate. Debate is great. We love debates. That's how we learn. It can be fun to see 2 hosts debating 2 sides of a topic, but a debate turns into an argument when you start repeating the same points over and over again, and no one wants to hear an argument. They love a debate. They don't like an argument. So avoid the repetition, because that's when the stop button happens. Easy execution fixes, right? And then that last one that I have highlighted, 19%, the hosts are talking over one another. 1 out of 5 people say they don't like when the hosts talk over one another. And so, if you're audio only, easy execution fix. You can use hand signals and say, oh, hey, I want to make a point right after you stop talking. Give me a little space here. But in video, you don't want a lot of hand signals. It can be distracting. However, if that is your initial first best solution in order to fix the talking over one another of the hosts, I vote do it. Do it, whatever it takes, because it's much better that you're not talking over one another and you have a few hand signals. So easy execution fixes that will make a big difference in satisfaction on your podcasts. We also asked, do you prefer that the hosts start the podcast by diving into the main topic, or do you prefer a little relaxed chit-chat first? We know, we value, we love the fact that podcasts are a little more loose in the presentation. However, a third of the people say, please dive into the topic right away. A third, that's a lot of people who just want you to get right to it, all right? The other, when you total the group of people that say, all right, little chit-chat's good, keep it short though, you have 75% of the people who are basically saying, all right, if you do a little chit-chat, keep it short, get right into it, all right? So the fast start is extremely important. All right, great. And then remember to give context for those who use you in the background. There is a lot of debate, audio, video. Does video lead, does audio lead, that sort of thing. We don't get into that debate in terms of this study, but we do ask people if they are consuming a video podcast, are they actively watching it, or are they using it in the background and doing something else? Half the people are consuming the video, but it is as a background. Okay, half the people. All right, of those people who are using it in the background, we asked, do you feel there are references to video that make you feel left out? So, the hosts are offering some video in the podcast, they're laughing at something, but they're not saying why they're laughing. They're not saying what's in the video. There's no context for it, all right? And so we ask consumers, do you feel left out when something like that happens? 7 out of 10 people say, yes, I feel left out when that is happening. So again, easy execution fix. If you're going to offer some video that's additive within the podcast, just have the hosts add a little bit of context so that the person who's using you in the background can feel part of the fun. All right, great.
All right, we're going to focus on 2 audiences. First, your existing audience, and then how you can grow with your new audience. The first is, everyone loves merch. I love that Libsyn and Pave Studios gave us something right when we got here. And actually, this audience likes it as well. Over a majority of people are aware of podcasts offering merch, and a quarter of them have purchased it already. But what I focus on is that upside. There's still another 44% who would purchase merch if it was available. This, show of hands, how many have had events, live events for their podcasts before? Yep, pretty good number, okay. So of those people who have attended an event, 85% will come back to it. They would do this again. That's a nice conversion rate. And how did they feel about it? What was the ROI on it? 71% of the people said that they felt more positive about the podcast. Now, when you think about the actual event that you do, of course, we want all the hosts on the stage, everyone can see them, but also be thinking about the front of the house. What is it when they walk into the event? What is it there in the back of the house that potentially there are VIP opportunities with that? So 71%, that's a good ROI. Now, in both of those, you've got to spend money on merch, you've got to spend money on events. So what about some free things that you can be doing? 4 out of 10 people do not receive an email from their favorite podcast. And when we asked them if they would have an interest in it, 1 out of 5 said that they would. This is an opportunity for you to develop a editorial calendar over the course of the year, what your content is going to be. You can include video, you can include pictures, stories, etc. And then when we asked them what would be the reason that you would sign up for an email, this one kind of surprised me. Gifts, prizes, that is a way that you can get people involved with your podcast, is by offering them gifts and prizes, but also look at the other. VIP benefits, extra info about the podcast, and also it coming from the host. We asked that, would you join a VIP club? Half the people said yes, they would. So our recommendation is to set up a calendar over the course of the year of what are your tentpole events throughout the year that you can communicate to that VIP club with. And whose voice should you use? You should use the podcast host's voice. 41%, definitely opening something. Hal shared with me at dinner the other night that he had as a client that changed the from the show name to the actual name of the host and saw an open rate double with that. So be thinking about that. All right, now let's focus on new audiences with this. To Hal's point about fast starts, 51% of the people will give you less than 5 minutes. You know, when I listen to Salad with a Side of Fries, Jen does a great job in the first 2 minutes and 15 seconds to make sure as a new listener, I know what this is going to be about. She's given me a clip from potentially the guest that's with her, and I know exactly what I'm going to get. I'm in at that point. So create the hook, build it up, and at that point, develop the story at that. Yeah, let's focus on that. Attention span, 10% give you less than a minute. But I feel like benefit of the doubt, focus on that 5 minutes. All right, short samples drive trial. So those snackable videos or audiograms that you make, that you either put into your email or you put onto social media, that's driving engagement. And when we ask people, how likely would you be able to do it? You see 1 out of 2 said that, yes, I will definitely do that. We asked them to list what are the top 3 ways that you're finding out about podcasts. Social media actually above friends and family. So we've all talked about word of mouth, and friends and family are that word of mouth. So if they verbally tell you about a podcast, man, you've got to check out this podcast that covers this subject, how likely are you to try it? 1 out of 2 said, yep, I'm likely to try it. What if they text you? What if they send something through social? 1 out of 2 said, yes, I will try it. So definitely make those snackable moments. Just finally, as I cover this, 4 out of 10 people say that they are aware of contesting within podcasts. That was actually a big number when I saw that. And then we asked them, how likely are you to participate in that, and does it bother you in any way? Right out of the gate, love hearing and participating in contests, 40%. Like hearing and sometimes participating in contests, 28%. We're at 85% when we get down to that blue bar. There's a very small number of people that say that they don't like contests. And we have a number of webinars that Hal's going to talk about here in a second. We'll dive deeper into this. Well, we just wanted to test, all right, on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being highly likely, how likely would you be to listen to one of your current podcasts for a chance to win the following prizes? $500 right up at the top. And there are creative ways that you can do that. And also things that don't cost you money. Experiences with your host. We'll have value of the host in our next podcast. But also some Zoom opportunities to meet with the staff, et cetera. It doesn't necessarily always have to be cash and prizes. So with that, Hal, we got about 2 minutes. Let's do the summary.
Great. Okay, so let's summarize what we talked about. Most podcast consumers listening to or watching 3 or few titles per week, that's the shelf space. To be in the game, you have to be in the top 3. People love their favorite podcast and they give the majority of usage to it. So ultimately, all right, first, we want to be in the game. We want to be in that top 3. The ultimate goal, we gotta be the favorite of enough people. All right, the first 10 to 60 seconds are critical. You just saw that a minute ago from Tim. And one of the things I was going to point out earlier about having that fast start, one of the things we advocate that you do is to start with a hook. We started it here when we got on stage. We started with one sentence to tell you why you'll want to invest your valuable time to listen to us for these 20 minutes. That's what you want to do with your podcast audience. The title of your episode is part of your sales pitch. The first 10 seconds should be part of your sales pitch to tell them, hey, we're going to talk about X, and here's a reason why it should be important, interesting, or funny for you. Whoa, the clicker's going crazy.
We got 30 seconds.
So start with the hook. Events, VIP clubs, merch sales, emails, contesting prizes, consider all of that as well as social media. All right, so actions to take, focus on perfecting that hook. First 60 seconds is critical. Set a marketing plan in place as well. All right, that's the QR code. You can go to our website, sign up for our 3 webinars. It's all free. We want to continue the conversation on the website. This is going to be a living and breathing thing, and really appreciate working with you, Tim.
Great.
It's been great.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.
All so much.
Appreciate it. Have a good rest of your show.